Hi everyone, I'm Sally. I'm the host of SAAN Share. Today I have the ladies from 5WAVES with me, and they have an organization on sibling sexual trauma, which is a very important topic. And so I am going to turn it over to Maria right now, and she will be our first guest speaker.
Okay, let me share my screen. And thank you, Sally. We're really honored to be here tonight. Let me make this bigger. If I can find, there we go. Okay, can everybody see this okay? Right. Okay, yes, thank you. We are 5WAVES. There are 5 of us. We are calling ourselves 5WAVES. We're here to talk about sibling sexual trauma. There are 5 of us, and 3 of us are here tonight. 2 couldn't be here. So Brandy, Hope, and I'm Maria Socolof, are here tonight to talk about this topic. Okay, our goals today are to introduce 5WAVES, describe what 5WAVES is doing, define and describe sibling sexual trauma, present this current state of knowledge and press on the topic, and then bring up calls for action among sexual assault or abuse advocates. So what is 5WAVES? It stands for 5 women who came together as advocates, and the WAVES stands for Worldwide Awareness, Voice, Education, and Support, and it's around sibling sexual trauma specifically. We are, as I said, 5 women from 5 time zones, and we just came together this past fall, and we were all in our own isolation on this topic and living our own personal experiences with sibling sexual trauma. 2 of us are survivors, and 3 are parents of children who are dealing with sibling sexual trauma. Each of the parents, I'll let Hope talk in a minute, but they've all dealt with it when disclosure occurred when their children were minors. We're still at home, so we do get a lot of adult survivors disclosing later, but in their case, it was for kids that were still at home. So I guess, yeah, Hope, do you want to jump in and just give a little story of how we all got together?
Sure, thanks so much. My name is Hope Sittler. I'm, as Maria said, I'm one of the co-founders of 5WAVES, and we're grateful to be here tonight. So it always brings sort of a smile to my face when I think about how the 5 of us came together, especially after hearing Maria state that we were each living our own lives and on our own journeys in isolation. So it's the coming together actually is quite a story in and of itself. Maria and Jane, who are the 2 survivors of sibling sexual trauma, had come together. They had met through another group as survivors of SST. And so that was one connection. I continue to moderate a Facebook group called Parents Coping with Sibling Sexual Trauma and Abuse. I started that group when 6 months into my journey, I had found absolutely no one who had been in my situation, not one single person, despite really digging in and looking everywhere I could, calling local resources, and there was nothing. And I just knew logically and intellectually that I could not be the only one on the planet, but it felt that way. And so I started this Facebook group, and lo and behold, slowly and surely people started to join. And I will say, I'm sure just like SANS, we take vetting those who are requesting to join our group extremely seriously, as the nature of the topics are very sensitive and people are extremely vulnerable. So there's a lot that goes into approving each person that requests to join. And that was started in March of 2021. Now today, that same group has 250 members. all of them parents of sibling sexual trauma. Jane attempted to join our group. Now, Jane is not a parent of sibling sexual trauma. She's a survivor, and she made that very clear in her join request. However, despite her good intentions of wanting to be a resource and for other people struggling with this on the other end, as the moderator, I was holding and continue to hold very tightly to the criteria for joining, which is to be a parent of SST. And so I politely and kindly responded to her, declining her join request, letting her know that she could not be accepted because she was not a parent. When Jane tells this story, Jane says, at that moment, I knew I had a live one. And I never really knew what that meant. And I asked her one day, and she said, well, I knew that if you cared enough to be so careful about who you were letting in and cared enough to actually message me back and let me know why you were not accepting my join request, I knew that you were someone who was ready to roll up your sleeves and do some work. And Jane was relentless. Jane continued to message me every couple weeks, every month or so. And I would send back most of the time polite thank yous or good to know, nothing more than 1 or 2 words. And one day in September of 2021, Jane messaged me, and I guess the wind was blowing in a different direction because I decided to answer her and engage in conversation with her. And in that conversation, she said to me, I have this other contact, Maria, and just this week, I have met Brandy and this other woman, Fiona, from the UK. And, all of these connections are coming together. Would you want to get on a call with all of us and let's see what we can do? And to my own surprise, I said yes. And so I would say, if it wasn't later that day, it was within a few days after that, the 5 of us got on a Zoom call, just like this. And for many of us on the call, I know at least for me, I will speak for myself, it was the first time I was speaking out loud about what was happening in my own family. Anything that I had talked about prior to that was just in typing on Facebook or through text, and it lacked a certain amount of personalizing the stories. And sometimes chemistry is just there. And the 5 of us over time really became to trust one another and like one another and lean on one another, both in the advocacy work we were doing and personally, and supporting one another in our collective efforts and in our individual efforts. And we knew the first thing we wanted to do, everyone on that initial call said, we need to create a website. We need to create a website. Well, God bless Brandy, who had already been working on and creating a website, just had all of this content, this beautiful, unbelievable content already written. And she was just looking for how to get it to the actual internet. And so we all joined forces on that project, and we all just took such pride, but no more than Brandy, that we were able to launch www.siblingsexualtrauma.com, which is the first of its kind website, completely comprehensive about sibling sexual trauma, that has information for survivors, for victims, for children who have harmed, for parents, for professionals, for extended family and friends to understand what the situation is and what people that they are related to or friends with may be going through and struggling with. And it has gained so much traction and so much traffic since January, just really not long at all. And so once that website was launched, the 5 of us were ready to roll up our sleeves and say, what's next? And we needed a name. We kept saying, we're 5 women in 5 time zones and 2 survived. It was too long of an intro. So 5WAVES was born. And here we are, and we're continuing along in our efforts and continuing to grow our own personal relationships as well, which I know I am very, very fortunate for.
Yeah, and thank you, Hope. And let me add, I am not muted. Okay, let me also add that when Brandy was preparing all this content, she promised her own children that she would make sure survivors reviewed it. So that's how she ended up contacting Jane, who was busy getting ready for her TEDx talk, and then called me because we had connected through Incest Aware. So that's how I ended up, and we all ended up helping review the content, but Jane and I were specifically able to review that content for Brandy that she had promised would be done. And also there were professionals, she had some professionals review other areas too that were relevant. So we are, as Hope said, very proud of that website through Brandy's doing.
Can I jump in here? I just want to say to our viewers who just joined us, we had talked about this before, but we did it before the recording. We have Hope disguising her voice and not being on camera in order to protect the anonymity of our children, and Brandy as well. That's why we have Hope and Maria speaking for Brandy. They're reading what Brandy is writing, and I just got to say that's just so respectful of their children as far as it's their stories. So that's just part of the explanation of why we're doing it the way we're doing it. All right, Maria, I'm gonna stop talking.
Okay, thanks. Okay, some of this already now got covered from what Hope just told us, but I'll list some of the other things. So I'm sorry, I've got to move things on my screen. So what we're doing, we've got the website, the siblingsexualtrauma.com, Hope's Facebook page, which she mentioned, Parents Coping with Sibling Sexual Trauma. We also have our own 5waves.org website, which just kind of talks about us a little bit and some of the projects we are doing. And there's also a Facebook page, 5WAVES. And Fiona is working on establishing parenting programs, and that's something that she's working on in currently. We also do a lot of speaking out, and like I mentioned, Jane scored the very prestigious Boca Raton TEDx talk, and she gave that in January. And since she can't be here with us, she's traveling actually. I do have about a minute, if you don't mind, to listen to her beginning of her talk. I'll just let her jump in virtually here. If I can do all this right. Sorry, not sure how to get out of this talk. Wait a minute.
Press the escape button.
I did, and it's not, oh, I guess I have to hit it twice. Oh, I didn't get it right. Sorry about that. So this, I'll just do a minute for Jane.
Sibling sexual abuse. In many ways, sibling sexual abuse, or SSA for short, is the last taboo subject. No one wants to talk about it, and too few people are studying it. This means countless children, parents, and communities are suffering, alone and unheard, without guidance, support, or even empathy. It's a silent epidemic. That's why we need to help survivors share their stories in order to build a community of people who could demand new research and solutions. So, what is sibling sexual abuse? Well, it's murky. Because of its secrecy and lack of research, even the experts can't agree. 40 years ago, when it happened to me, I thought only adults can sexually abuse kids. Even today, many parents and kids still believe the same thing. What we do know is it involves
All right, sorry. It's about a 12 or 13-minute video, so you guys can watch that once we're done. I just wanted to give you a little taste of Jane, and it's already got about 69,000 views on that. So, and that was dropped on YouTube in April. So, So we do speaking out in a lot of other places. We do guest speaking on podcasts. Here we are. This is SAAN Shares. We also have blogs on the website. Might talk about a little more if we have time. And Jane and I both have our personal websites. Mine about the healing from chronic pain, and hers is focused on sibling sexual trauma. And I have a memoir out. Can't even think of the name right now. The Invisible Key, unlocking the mystery of my chronic pain. And Jane is working on hers as well. So it's to be called Complicated Courage, as far as we know. I just wanted to list some of the collaborators we've met and have worked. I say worked with, but a lot of it's for doing podcasts and just connecting with these people or organizations. I want to specifically point out Siblings 2. It's a podcast, and she also has a website. Nancy Miller has it out of, sorry, Nancy, has it out of Canada, but it's a great podcast and resource. And she also takes people's stories anonymously to use for research. So on the website, you can tell your story anonymously, and it goes into some of the research they're doing. So that's one of all these that is specifically targeted on sibling sexual trauma.
Maria, we're having a little trouble with your sound.
I forgot to plug back in.
Okay. All right. Got it.
I wasn't sure it was going to work. I apologize. Is that better? Okay, sorry. So these are the organizations we've collaborated with. I was just saying Siblings 2 is one specifically I wanted to point out because it's targeted specifically on sibling sexual trauma, as opposed to all these others, which do a host of other things. But they do have a place where you can anonymously tell your story on their website, #Siblings 2. Okay, and we're happy. We would love to work with others, other organizations, people represented here at SAAN, to speak, or whatever we can do together to make change and grow awareness. Essentially, is what we really want to do. I think Hope did a good job of describing the sibling sexual trauma website. It's huge. It's here. I just took a screenshot of the top menu, and there's about 9 categories, and under each of these categories there's a drop down list, and there's a total of about 70 different pages on different topics related to this. And it can be, some are for survivors, whether they're adult survivors or they're teens at this point who might be looking for information, any age really, but we expect it would be teens. If anyone younger probably wouldn't be looking on the internet for it. But for parents as well, the siblings who have caused harm, and any other family members, as well as professionals, because there's not a lot of information even in the professional field of people understanding the magnitude and what's really going on in secret, so much secrecy. And again, it covers all levels of sexual harm or suspected harm. So it really runs the gamut of everything. And it's, like Hope said, it's just a huge, amazing resource. It also, on the top, it has links to, what do you call them? Can't think of the word, but there are links to rain.org and things like Stop It Now, where hotlines, that's what I was trying to say, where you can go directly from here. It's really a resource hub where there's lots of links, there's lots of resources to bring you to other places that would have what somebody might need.
Maria, can I just make one comment? When disclosure happened in our family at the end of October of 2020, and I turned to Google to find anything, anything, there was nothing came up. I could not find anything. Maybe I think there was 1 or 2 very, very outdated articles that on the whole said nothing. But the fact that this resource now exists it has brought so much information to the world in a very short period of time, where it wasn't necessarily adding to what was already there. It was initiating this subject into the public realm in a way that has never been done. And I think the example that I always use to illustrate this is just the mere fact that the domain name siblingsexualtrauma.com was available and was inexpensive to purchase shows you just how little there was out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a sort of one of a kind still, and we're so happy we have it to offer now. So, what is sibling sexual trauma? Essentially, it's harmful sexual behavior among siblings. Now, we use harmful sexual behavior, and that's what the industry now is using, instead of saying it's sexual abuse, because it's involved children on children. And we really need to distinguish it from adult on child, because it just has a host of different aspects. But the definition here, as it says, developmentally inappropriate sexual behavior displayed by children and young people, which is harmful or abusive. And I highlighted harmful or abusive because it does include abuse and abusive behavior. I know some survivors have said, see harmful behavior as not as severe as abuse. But the harm, in a definition, harmful is overriding, and any kind of harm, and abusive harm is harm as well. So I just don't want anyone to think that we're minimizing this in any way. But we find harmful sexual behavior is a better overreaching definition to use in the case of sibling sexual trauma. Like I said, it's among siblings, can be biological, step siblings, or really anyone living in the same home. And a lot of times we also hear it can include cousins and other relationships as well. We're focusing here a little bit more on people in the same household. And also we've heard sometimes they say who self-identify as siblings. And it's really those close relationships what makes it so difficult and so traumatic. And it can be a brother to sister, it can be brother to brother, sister to sister, and sister to brother. All forms it can be. Right now they seem to think that it's more prevalent within the brother to sister situation, which is likely the case, but there's such lack of information that we really don't even know the numbers yet. And it can be multiple siblings involved as well. Some of the characteristics. First of all, it often starts sooner than other child sexual abuse. We have some statistics here that 50% of children affected are not even 8 when it starts. It often lasts longer than other child sexual abuse, and 75% is reported to go on for more than a year, and on average, it might last about 5 years. Again, these are some data points, but there's a lot of lack of information. So there's still a lot to be learned in the future, hopefully, when we can get more data. How often? It can be from one time. In my case, it was literally one time, and it was enough to make me put it out of my brain for 32 years. I didn't remember, and I dealt with chronic pain as a result, and other anxiety and things. So it can be once, it can be sporadic, it can be several times a year, month, day. It can happen so often because the children are in the same home, and there's just so many opportunities really for it to happen. And at the same token, where it can